So let's start at the beginning. And just a reminder that, and this was aimed at students, $40 a year. To me, one of the values of being a member of the society is our new president's newsletter every month. It's really good. And one of the features of the society is that you don't have to have been there, you simply have to be interested. And that's sufficient. So these are the founding fathers. There were no founding mothers. They're all male, you can see. And a really interesting collection of folk, actually brought together by a Wellington businessman who founded the New Zealand Farmers Cooperative. But he was also a writer, and he is a great internationalist, and he was all about progress and growing, especially population, which was, well, there was space for it in those days. And somehow he managed to attract Admiral Byrd, the American explorer, aviator, and who's memorialized at the top of Mount Vic. And in between them is Douglas Mawson, the Australian geologist who went south with Scott and then led his own expeditions, and a quite remarkable fellow for his endurance. He left base one year with him and his two companions, and a few months later he was the only one that got back. But he went, I think it was Adelaide, he was professor of geology at, and continued as a geologist for many, many years. But that was in 1933, and really the society was, although Leigh Hunt was actually pushing quite hard for more interest by the government in the Antarctic, this didn't really happen until the mid-50s with the International Geophysical Year and the support of the Trans-Antarctic Expedition, which was led by Ed Hillary. And it was sort of interesting at the time because the Royal Society did a report for government on the value of doing research in the Antarctic, and they actually concluded that it would be better to spend the money in New Zealand. But through partly the efforts of the society, but there's a great popular feeling and the involvement of Ed Hillary, who had just climbed Everest, and his leadership with folks on the Trans-Antarctic Expedition really made a public campaign that the government decided not to ignore. And so it established Scott Base, and that began New Zealand's program in the Antarctic. Well, Victoria University led the way among New Zealand universities because of Professor Bob Clark. He became known in later years as the Ayatollah. He was a very thoughtful, considered, but quite strong-minded professor of geology. He'd went to Edinburgh for his PhD and studied under Arthur Holmes, came back in 1954 to take over from Charles Cotton, who of course this building is named after. But it was Bob that actually set the research culture of the geology in this university that still persists. And he'd just been here a couple of years, and he had got himself on the Ross Sea Committee, which was chaired by Eddie Robertson, the head of the DSIR at the time. And around the table were the leaders of all the divisions of DSIR. And then there was Bob to represent the universities. So he suggested that the universities should have a role in the IGY, being, with students and researchers and that sort of thing. But the DSIR view was that universities were really there to teach, and they were the people who did the research. So Bob had these two students, McKelvey and Webb, third-year students, pretty capable, he thought. And but he couldn't get permission for them to go down, so he suggested that they might go and inquire at the US Embassy to see if they might hitchhike a ride down to McMurdo. When the Rossi Committee heard that, they immediately offered them a place on the Endeavour, and that's how McKelvey and Webb got to the Antarctic. And they turned out to be pretty successful as well. And following that, there were, well, the second expedition was fortuitous in a way that it had an experienced Arctic explorer. Here, Colin Ball, physicist, postdoc from Cambridge, and he decided that he would support or run the next expedition to show them how proper expeditions were organized. And I have to show this image because he was my PhD supervisor, and that was a deal we had that he would get properly acknowledged when I had a chance. But before I do that, this is my early experience in the Antarctic as part of my friend Vic McGregor there. I'm the one on the right. We were roommates at Auckland University. I never wanted to go to the Antarctic or never was interested. I was interested in caves. But he came back from the Antarctic and said, look, why don't the two of us go down there and we'll get a couple of others, and you could do it in those days. And so there's four of us after 2 months at 85 South, mapping the geology and looking very pleased with ourselves. Now, I went to Ohio State after that. That gave me a leg up because although I had an honours degree from Auckland with my master's, my undergraduate record was pretty appalling. In fact, it was a straight C. But by then, at that stage, Colin Ball had left Victoria and had gone to Ohio State. And he thought that someone who'd got to the Antarctic, even a Kiwi with a bad undergraduate record, might actually work out in the States. So that's Colin later in life. He did run the Institute of Polar Studies for a while when I was there, and was very helpful in his contacts. And of course, he also wrote this really, well, fascinating story of their time with McKelvey, Webb, and the biologist in the dry valleys, innocence in the dry valleys. Now, when I came to Victoria, it was 1970. I'd answered an advertisement in the New Zealand Herald. A postdoctoral fellow wanted to run Antarctic expeditions. And my choice was that or an oil company, but the oil company had turned me down, so this suited pretty well. But I wasn't quite prepared for the culture. And but I soon became a part of it. It was quite a robust group in those days. And there were two places where staff and students mixed. One was the George Hotel, and the other is on Boyd Wilson Field. And while Bob Clark isn't there, though he made very good home brew, Professor Vella, that some of you will have heard of, holding the football. Noel Trustram, Ted Hardy. Ted made the department run. He was the chief technician. Every morning, Bob would come in and they would talk together and they would walk around and get things sorted out. But I know there's Doug Wright from 1971 who went off to Australia and made squillions. Phil Kyle, then well, by then a graduate student, but he failed his first year. But Bob thought he was a good guy anyway. And he's now done 40 trips on Erebus, and there's a book coming out, which he's the core of. Rodney Grapes, some of you all know Rodney. Well, charismatic character, yeah, another great character, Jeremy Gibb. Let's see. A brief advertisement for next week about this time with the I-15 reunion. Dave Reed, here, originally keen on sports, but got captured by this whole sort of culture of the time. The Sturgis senior lecturer, Peter Barrett up there, and so it goes on. A cheerful lot. But if the VY-15 story, just after I arrived to Antarctica, comes next week. So I'm just going to skip 30 years, or almost 30 years. I'm just mindful and somewhat respectful of the crisis that the school and the university is now facing. So Cliff comes in on cue, and here's Cliff under the flag at Parliament. This is the demo that we organised, sort of a culmination of a bit of a campaign. There's Nancy and Cliff and a couple of others tearing up the Dean's report in the quad, picketing the Dean's office. So it was quite a challenging time, and we did actually win through. Foreign Affairs came to support us and actually found a way of retaining the Antarctic Research Centre, though geology did actually have some significant cuts. Anyway, we were quite small then. It was basically, the staff was me and Alex even then, and people like some postdocs, as Gavin and Nancy were postdocs. Cliff was there recovering from the previous year. Natalie, she's still there, was getting ready to go south. So those are some images from the past, a bit of history, and yeah, there's I suppose, yeah, Cliff and I have talked about this. Well, the culture's changed. I think the issues are bigger. I've got to say, I think the Antarctic's a special place, not just for people who go there, but for everyone, just because it's started to melt. And it has such a huge influence, not just regionally or even just on sea level, but in many other ways in the rest of the world. And it's also a continent of peace and science. It's the only continent that hasn't had a war, no genocides. The Antarctic Treaty is still a remarkable organization in that it survived in this sort of somewhat polarizing world that we've got, and we just would like to keep it that way. So that's really it from me. And just to remind you that we're very pleased to have this issue that's just come out, which, well, just to let you know so that you can tell other people that we've decided that people who sign up to the Society for a year this month can get this one for free. There's 2 more sheets that follow.
Yeah, I mean, see, I don't have many stories to tell, but I think that's one of being the best things about being in the Society is like hanging out with people who have those stories. And I'm glad that you recognise that, well, I don't want to say the jollies of the good old days, but recently had this argument with my good old friend Warren over there about the difference in where we focus our efforts now, as yes. You know, obviously not just in Antarctica, but in everything we do. And I think I just heard a famous actor at the Harvard kind of graduation say, you know, every generation has the biggest challenge that needs to be overcome. And it certainly feels like that. You know, as our lives get better, our expectations kind of get higher and our resilience in some way gets lower. I'm really going off on a tangent here, but I guess
that's quite interesting, because you say as our lives get better, but
definitely. I mean, we
they
have,
are in some aspects, but not in others.
well, I think the difference is bigger. The difference between the haves and the have-nots is potentially much more vast. But these are the kinds of things that you think about when you're thinking about the deep time of Antarctica, and how our tiny little human actions are impacting the vastness of a continent that has been untouched for so long. Yeah, it's easy to get lost in it, and it was a nice reminder as well to see the stories of the strikes, because we were just kind of talking at GNS about the fact of what are we doing at GNS to support Vic right now and the geology school, and it's very serious, and and most people have come from Vic, and if they haven't come from Vic, then they have a connection to Vic, and it's need to do something about that. But so Natalie, it was I didn't realize Peter just told me the other day that you were his last master's student. And so from Bob Clark to Colin Bull, yes, to Peter Barrett to Natalie Robinson.
Well, and potentially someone in that room. I'm looking for a student.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking. Who's going to be next in that list? How incredible. And yeah, so I guess to come back to the society, I joined on under Peter's invitation, and quite quickly stepped into the role of chair, which was very intimidating. And the Antarctic Society is celebrating its 90th year this year, and it's a very old institute, and what I've learned is that the efficiency of the meetings that are run underneath that umbrella, underneath that kind of tutelage and tradition, is it's really incredibly effective. And it's a lot of the administration side has taught me and put me in really good stead for creating functional meetings and valuing people's time, because all of the society stuff is voluntary. And so I think in everything I do now, it's kind of like, how do I ensure that everybody that's here is able to contribute and can contribute, and I'm getting the most out of them and they're getting the most out of whatever we're doing. There's lots of those little things about the society that have really helped the way that I think about work, or where I put my energy, because I'm always the first to say that my work is not a job. I just get paid to think about things that I love thinking about. So as every kind of old society is going through, we're having a review at the moment about what our priorities are, how they've evolved or not evolved, and what we're basically kind of delivering our membership, what the value of being a member of the society is. And that in itself has been an incredible kind of experience of deep thinking, and I think it all comes back to this, storytelling, and basically having that capacity to have space for relationships in a world where it's so frequently kind of just not, it's through through screens, through social media, through anonymity, and the society is the opposite of that. You know, it's kind of bringing all of who you are, all of your passion into something, and having conversations with people who care about the same things that you do. The incredible things that I've kind of learnt in regards to the Antarctic Treaty, the New Zealand Antarctic Strategy, and a huge kind of emphasis on the international collaboration. And that's been, you know, borne out in our midwinter celebrations that we've had, where I had to email ambassadors from various countries and ministers and you know, shake James Shaw's hand and introduce him to speak last year, which was a real highlight. And I think there's just so much space in the society to do anything really. Just follow whatever it is that you're specifically interested in, but in general you can kind of just absorb almost what is there, and just a great team to be a part of. So I mean, I'm personally going to be going for a beer in the Hunter Lounge after this, before Nick's talk, so I can hand over to you, Natalie. I know that you're also really pressed for time.
Not really sure what to say, but I'll just talk about my experience really. I wasn't really expecting that photo of the Antarctic Research Centre from 20 years ago to pop up, but yes, that's how long I've been associated with Antarctica, and grateful to have that first initial opportunity that really opened a door that I hadn't been expecting. In terms of going there a few times over half a lifetime really, my experience has obviously evolved from being a student on someone else's event, where all I needed to worry about was keeping myself safe and collecting the data I needed. Yes, it's evolved quite a way to you know, leading fairly sizable teams to Antarctica, managing the infrastructure that we need, the relationships that we need to foster, all the planning. And last year was a particularly challenging year in terms of planning for an Antarctic field season. And then of course being responsible for the health and safety of the whole team, which when you've got a team of people who are all at least as experienced as you, of course that makes that part an easy job, but it's a fresh challenge and a fresh set of eyes when we have students with our teams as well. And so just that experience of taking new people to Antarctica I always find invigorating as well, because you get to remember what it's like the first time you went and what all those first experiences were. So that's been quite a ride, and that's been something that I have been able to do with the support of my family, even while having 3 children in that period. So it is possible, although you know, we all have our own challenges to overcome. In terms of the society, Peter's asked me to speak today because I think I am the elected representative for the North Island. So I'm the North Island Vice President of the Society, as well as a long-time member of the Wellington branch. And over the last, well, it would be 18 months ago that we started now, we've been working towards, more than that actually, that's getting on. Yeah, that'd be about right, about 18 months that we've been developing a new strategy for the society, because we recognise that the society needs to be possibly more forward-looking, maybe attract a broader audience, and we just really want an opportunity to help expand people's understanding of Antarctica and its importance for the world in more than just a scientific sense. Although, of course, I'm a scientist, so that's my bias. And while I'm on that point, I will point out that it's not just Antarctica, but we cover the Southern Ocean as well. So if you've noticed a few media highlights recently, have been talking about changes in the Southern Ocean and what that might mean for our climate future. So that's an important connection that actually connects Antarctica to the rest of the world, is via the Southern Ocean. So yeah, there's a whole heap of new ideas that we have in terms of opportunities, both for members of the society to use the activity, be a user of the resources and activities that we're putting on, but also really interested in hearing from people who might want to contribute to creating content and helping share messages about Antarctica with, well, really a huge range of audiences. Some of the activities that we're working on range from, at one end of the spectrum, focusing on school children and their families and creating an interactive experience that gives them an opportunity to have a real life talk with a real life scientist who's worked in Antarctica, and then there's some hands-on sort of engagement activity. Right through to, at the other end of the spectrum, we've got people in the society who are on first name basis with some of the ministers and diplomats that are actually shaping the future for, well, our part of the world, really. So the society has very broad, our audience covers, our potential audience covers every aspect of New Zealand and beyond, really. And so I just encourage you to think about, either using what we're creating or actually contributing to help create it. And we just really want to help provide a platform for sharing those important messages.
So I was going to say that one of the things the society does that I just thought of when Georgia was speaking is it's not really a science society. It's more of a a general society for people interested in Antarctica, and it provides that opportunity for scientists, which we don't have a lot of in the Antarctic community.
Yeah. Another feature of the society is its independence. This is not a license to say whatever you like. But we do have a set of objects and principles, and so we've got a group on science and policy that has made submissions on the strategy a couple of times and consulted, and we've had some useful, interesting conversations, or even the bit of work that Robin Faulkner and I did on an organisational framework for New Zealand's Antarctic research. And that came out of a comment that Juliet Gerard made to an Antarctic conference, in which she described Antarctic research as a very complex ecosystem. Like, nobody seemed to know, except a few insiders knew parts of it, but no one could actually get a view of the whole thing. Robin and I thought, well, we should be able to do this. Well, it took us a year to do it. And we talked to about 30 or 40 different groups. But it's actually a document. There are diagrams that show you what happens. And in fact, In a couple of weeks, we'll actually be talking to Gary Wilson, who chairs the Royal Society Commission, who has told us he's going to upgrade it. So well, we still have work to do, but we thought we'd done. So there is that sort of aspect of the society, a whole range of things. I just want to mention Laura, who's here, who's actually working on about 80 boxes of stuff that go back to the Colin Bull, Bob Clark days. And there's some amazing sort of correspondence that are just as a resource for when someone gets around to doing some history. And there's Matt, who's collecting the videos also of some amateur footage from expeditions 50 years ago. So there's that whole side of our sort of legacy.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking on from that as you said, as Natalie said, you know, Antarctica and the Southern Ocean, and there's kind of, you know, strategy and policy documents, and there's, I mean, we just had somebody join our committee from oh now I've lost it, from the like space, Justine Roberts, what is she doing?
Sorry.
So she's working on like the New Zealand Space Treaty, and we had an astronomer talk or planetary physicist talk a few years ago about some of the measurements that they do down there, and I think it's and the same reason that we kind of we talk to scientists, because that's who we have access to, and we often talk to kind of paleoclimate scientists because that's what we think about. But there's every kind of activity, you know, there, and tourism and the Antarctic Treaty, and, you know, the politics of re-signing against mining, and I mean, there's everything that you could possibly think in a space for everyone, and as I say, I mean, it's just that passion. If you've got an interest in something, then it's
there's quite an interesting program. There's a group on oral histories where recordings have been made, and they've recorded all of the IGY people, 2 or 3 hours, what their experiences were. And so it's really, there's a character, Bernie Gunn, who's quite famous as a strong-minded geologist, and just describing, just remember that his voice is dead now, describing what it's like to be in a tent when the Twin Otter arrives, because when the Twin Otter used to arrive to resupply them, they would, Cranfield, I guess it was, really enjoyed flying low over the tent, just rev it up just to make sure that everybody was awake inside before they landed. No, that's having fun. Yeah, we don't have too much of that. But anyway, just those voices from the past, they're really quite fun. And I mean, at the same time as they were having fun, they're also doing some amazing journeys, sledging journeys in those first few years, particularly the main Bob Miller. Laid the depots for Hillary with George Marsh, and then a few years later, made the longest slot dog sledge journey in Antarctica ever, sort of surveying the Victorian land. Yeah, but yes, that's not how it is these days. It's but the issues are equally important. Well, think about the 100,000 tourists go there as well. It's a bit of an issue, but a learning experience and an opportunity. Many sides to it.